All right. Hi, everybody. Are you trapped in the cycle of looking for validation from others and when you don't get it, feeling gutted and frustrated? If you're trapped in the cycle of constantly looking for validation and you're struggling with confidence, self-worth, and unhappiness when you don't get it, then this episode is for you. Welcome to the Hero's Journey podcast. My name is Joel Sadler, entrepreneur and digital marketing extraordinaire,
Extraordinaire.
extraordinaire. I help people basically scale their businesses and scale my own projects and have a lot of fun doing it. I'd like you to meet Mike Harris, entrepreneur and human behavioral expert and coach. Been coaching and training people for more than 17 years. So you're in good hands today. If you want to have deeper and more powerful conversations, then subscribe. Watch the rest of our videos. We appreciate it. We're building a community of like-minded men and women and people that want to basically jump into self-reflection and grow together. Right. So today we're tackling validation. It's such a big word around self-validation and getting validation from others. And it's just this, I see it as a bit of like a sort of spider web or maybe a journey, like a maze of finding my way through it and unpacking pieces along the way. So I think what I always find really helpful was a bit of a definition from Mike. So Mike, how would you sum up, validation, but then also the intricacy of self-validation, and the distinction between the two?
You just cut out there briefly. You asked me how I'd sum something up, and then I lost you just
Oh,
for like
yeah. So,
a couple of
so
seconds.
validation in itself,
Hmm.
how would you sum up or define validation and self-validation?
Yes. So validation is looking or have been validated for what you've done, being seen, being heard, being validated, being acknowledged,
Mm,
um, so that you feel seen and heard and validated by others. And I mean, you've kind of, when you drop to the self-validation, and this is kind of the answer to what you've talked about with the
mm,
external, is that we're often looking for validation from others. And then when we don't receive it, we let that be the thermostat or
mm,
the meaning that we then attach to whether we value ourselves or not. So, if we're
mm,
constantly seeking from our partner, our parents, a boss, or whoever, and then we don't get it, then we feel
mm,
diminished.
mm,
We feel like our self-worth is diminished. We don't feel good enough. We don't feel
mm,
that we've been
mm.
acknowledged. And so that can then send you on a bit of a spiral.
Oh, yeah.
And this all starts when we're kids. So,
Mm,
as children, if you look at people that we subordinate to, or in other words, that we minimize ourselves to then kind of place on a pedestal or look up to,
mm,
are our parents. They're the first ones that we give up our authority or self-power to because we have to, right? We're babies.
mm,
And as
mm,
babies, we depend on the survival of us, knowing that our parents or our mother initially feeds us and we need them to take care of us. So we learn certain things and nuances. And if we make a noise, this happens. If we cry like this, we get this response. And so all this is training us and wiring our nervous system as to what certain outcomes will happen with certain behavior.
mm,
And
mm,
so as we get, go from baby to toddler and start growing up into a young child, we've learned all these different things subconsciously, which means you're not necessarily conscious. It's not at the forefront of your mind that you're consciously
mm,
thinking, I'm going to do this, but it's all
mm, mm,
subconscious. It's like the way that our nervous system's even wired, and we just programmed and we just do these things.
mm,
And so, parents are the first ones, then it becomes teachers at kindergarten or at school. And we learn, like often, that we have to act or behave a certain way to be validated, to get validation from these people. And then
mm,
if we behave this way, which is outside of what they want, we're going to get ostracized, we're going to get minimized, we're going to get told off, whatever it is. And so we learn then that, well, I need to validation to get this acceptance. And so this behavior continues on through our lives into our teenagehood and then into adulthood. And we don't often realize that we've got these things that are literally programmed into our system, like a
mm,
computer program.
mm.
And so we've essentially, each of us in slightly different ways, have learnt to self-abandon what's most important in us in order to get validation or get our needs met. And this
Yeah.
is how it kind of unfolds. Does
Oh,
that answer the
that's
question clearly enough?
oh yeah, it's very succinct and such a huge piece, explained in a couple of minutes. Amazing. I think back to just how how big a part of my growth journey has been around this validation piece. And like I was constantly for many, many years looking for validation externally. You
Hmm.
mentioned about yeah, work and your boss and stuff like that. I was in situations building businesses and working for people and like working to all like crazy hours of the night, like 3 a.m., 1 a.m. constantly, and and I get that there sometimes in the start of a career and all that there's a proving yourself to if you're pursuing a career, but for me it was more than that. It was not necessarily just around proving my metal or you know um showing that I'm committed. It was actually to the extreme where I was looking for validation from people, and that
Yeah.
was from bosses, that was from clients, it was probably from partner. I can't necessarily think of my partner back then, but this is a few years ago now. It was to the extreme where it was actually very detrimental to my health and
Yeah.
mental
So
health as
go back
well,
to that time for a sec. So when
Mm,
you think about
mm.
that, is it around the boss time that you've kind of got at the forefront of your mind, like when you were working long hours? Is that kind of
Yeah,
the
yeah. It was a
okay?
certain guy which I love and respect, and he's still a friend to today. So it was nothing to do with him. It was my issue around like me
Yeah.
just trying to validate myself to him for whatever reason, And I actually think I did put him
So
in a bit of a
did you look at him
father,
as a fa
yeah,
yeah,
father
father
figure.
figure?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly what I
So
was
it
about
was
to
me
say.
trying to
Yeah.
prove, and I became aware of that actually partway through, and I was like, oh, and I had a light bulb moment. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So you literally, as I was saying that, you took the word out of my mouth because it makes
Mm,
sense, right? And this
mm.
is what we all do. And and I don't know if you mind me telling your story and the fact that would you want to share what happened with your dad, say, for example, in order to probably have this part play out, if you're happy
Yeah,
to share
yeah,
that?
yeah, sure. Yeah, well, I lost my dad when he was 52. I was pretty young, so I would have been 25, I think. And but prior to that, he was living overseas, so we hadn't seen a lot of each other for a period of time. And then prior to that, I worked with him all the time. I was literally helped him build three businesses from the age of 17 to 21 kind of thing. Yeah, so that's the history
Yeah.
there.
So it
Mm,
makes complete
mm,
sense, and this is something I found across working with lots of different people, is
mm,
that if they've had a breakdown or there's a perceived loss of a parent, either,
mm,
due to them passing away or the parents just left and created a void, the parents are separated, they don't have anything to do with that particular parent, or they're just
mm,
absent, it creates a void. And so we
mm,
naturally are looking to fill that void with something that resembles the very thing that we've lost, and it
mm,
becomes important to us. And again, there's no, I mean, this happens in life, right? So
mm,
it's
mm,
not about making it wrong or right. The fact that you were, trying to impress this man or
mm,
fulfill what you thought he wanted in order to receive love and validation from a father
mm,
that wasn't there,
mm,
and he kind of became this surrogate father.
mm.
It's not wrong. It's just that
No.
it has certain outcomes. And when
Mm, mm.
it would have, if you look at the benefits that came for you for
Oh,
that,
there's
it
huge
obviously drove
benefits.
you. You
Yeah,
like
yeah,
went above and beyond. You would have been amazing at your job. You would have been
yeah,
like
but
probably like smashing stuff out.
yep, but also, I was just driving the other day and like, you commented on my spreadsheets. We were looking at a project earlier and you're like, holy crap, like look at your spreadsheets and how detailed you are and tracking everything. Like I learned that from him. Like some
Yeah.
of the skills, the most detailed and strengths that I have at the moment with my personality type were kind of unlocked during that time hanging out
Hmm.
with the guy.
Yeah, totally.
So there's
Yeah,
definitely
so
pros
he
and
became a
cons.
surrogate. You can see the benefits
Yeah.
of the stuff
Mm,
coming from you. Where it
mm,
becomes interesting, and again, if you just look at the kind of other side of it, if we flip
mm,
it a little bit, it's like,
mm,
well, how was that a disservice, or how was that not helping you in that
mm,
sense?
mm,
And it was more, if we look at it through that lens, it's
mm,
more just the relationship you had with self, right? So
mm,
you were
mm.
seeking, and this is kind of where we link back to at the start of our
Yeah.
talk today, it's the need to seek the validation from elsewhere, which is natural. It's a natural
Mm,
human thing to do. We want to be validated by our parents or people that we look up to.
mm,
But when you come home to yourself and you actually give yourself the validation you're needing, which is really the secret,
mm,
then you don't seek the validation the same elsewhere. And so it's when you become enough for you and you
right.
become whole for you and you validate yourself in the areas that you need validation, then you don't create these codependent relationships where you're
Mm,
needing a particular thing from that person. And if it doesn't happen, it kind of breaks down. When you
mm,
have someone else in your life, then you're honoring yourself for you, you're honoring them for them, and you get to meet each other. And
mm, mm,
yes, you fulfill each other's values, but it's not the same kind of codependency on seeking or
mm,
needing validation because you've given that to yourself, and therefore your self-worth has risen. But when we're
mm,
seeking it externally all the time, we don't get it. That's when we're letting the outer world dictate our inner world and dictate our self-worth or how we see ourselves.
mm. Yeah, that's interesting. That's really interesting. I think as I've grown and, developed and faced some of these situations and evolved and started self-validating a lot more, it's also quite interesting then revisiting, relationships from the past and how the dynamics changed,
Big time.
um, and feeling a lot more comfortable in my own 2 feet, a lot
Yeah.
more grounded and a lot more able to make decisions for myself without the baggage of kind of going, oh, what would they think or what would they say or what should I do right here?
Yeah.
I can just be
Yeah, so
myself,
just on that note
Pretty
there,
cool
like what
way.
you've just summed
Mm,
up so that
mm,
you get to do what you
mm.
think you need to and you move
Yeah, for
ahead
me,
without seeking
make
their
my own
validation.
decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what that really means is that
Mm,
you're
mm,
valuing yourself and your
mm,
authenticity. In other words, what your beliefs are, what your priorities or value systems are,
mm,
becomes the most important. You no longer self-abandon your priorities in
mm,
order to seek validation in that codependent relationship from someone
mm,
else.
mm,
Because when we abandon ourselves and our own values and our own priorities in order to seek the validation, we actually end up resentful anyway, because we resent ourselves, we're pissed off with ourselves, whether it's
mm,
conscious at the time or not,
mm.
but we've
Yeah.
self-abandoned again. And so we're
Heck
like,
yeah.
and your self-worth diminishes because you've self-abandoned. And
Yeah.
so you can see when we've been, raised certain ways, and if you've been, strongly programmed, again, not making
Mm,
it right or wrong, but it's
mm,
just the way
mm.
that you've attached and made things mean.
Yeah.
When you've kind of really had a self-abandonment issue and you need to seek the validation of others, it really ends up a bumpy ride, like a roller coaster of highs and lows,
Mm,
versus when you fill your own cup and when you
mm, mm,
validate yourself and you honor yourself and what's
mm.
most important to you. There's always ups and downs. That's part of the human
Yeah.
experience. We're all going to have different human emotions,
Mm,
but the ups and downs aren't as dramatic.
yeah.
They're like little kind of waves versus big
Yeah.
loops, like a roller
Tell
coaster
me
that you're
about it.
going up and down. Yeah. Well, you share. So you
100%.
share. Be
No,
great for
it's
you to
good.
share
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
experience of what you were experiencing before you understood some of this work and started
Mm,
doing it, and how you'd show up and what you were feeling too then after some of
yeah.
it.
I think there's two things that happened for me. One was I do believe that there's like in career, for example, or knowledge or chosen niche to of discipline or whatever. Mine was digital marketing space. I found that after um a number of years or maybe hours that I hit that I felt that I knew enough to be an expert in the space. So I
Hmm.
moved, I look back and kind of go from a sort of novice or junior or uncovering to sort of where confidence, around competence and confidence was low to sort of medium and then sort of to high, and that was more, I moved into what I felt like a trusted advisor type of hat for my clients where
Hmm.
they could trust my advice. And generally, 9 times out of 10, it was correct. Of course, I make mistakes and the data,
Yeah, you're
it would
human,
be
of
opposite
course.
to the data or whatever.
Yeah.
But in general, yeah. So for me, that was a bit of an age thing, I think, as well, of just growing up and growing in confidence and self-validating through that. Um, but the big thing for me, obviously, was definitely the piece around my dad and around my mum as well. I know for a fact, there was some validation things I was looking for validation in different areas or from different people.
Yeah.
Particularly the father side of it when I look back. I think I think one of the key things which I would have found helpful and might be helpful for some of our listeners now, when I was younger, it was a lot more extreme. And maybe I've just done more work on myself over the last 10, 15 years and
Yeah.
probably be a bit of both. But for anyone that's younger, that's listening, say in their 20s, early 20s or mid 20s or even 30s, I suppose, or younger, that is really grappling with this situation, it can play havoc in relationships, it can play havoc at work and all
Massively.
that sort of stuff. Like, what would you say, to someone in that space that's just, I mean, even in we're 40s now, even someone in their 40s that's just really
Oh,
grappling with
look,
it,
it happens to
what's the
40s and
starting
people
point,
all through their 40s, 50s, 60s. It depends.
Yeah, yeah,
Some
true.
people will go
At
out
any
like that
stage of their life.
because, yeah, because and I meet people all the time
Yeah.
in my work,
Mm, mm.
from in their teens to their 60s,
Yeah.
that are still dealing with stuff with their
Mm,
parents, and their
mm,
parents have
mm.
passed away years and years,
Right.
decades ago
Yeah.
sometimes. And so, again, this is an interesting thing too, it's a slight detour, but kind of on the same path. And
Mm,
that is, people used to say, age brings wisdom.
mm-hmm,
But I don't believe age does bring wisdom. I think being curious and continually self-exploring brings wisdom. And yes,
mm,
you could then say with age, if you continue to do that, you have wisdom if
mm,
you apply that as well. But for those that go through life and they don't stay curious and they stay
mm,
fixed with a rigid mind and they don't self-explore and they don't go within to uncover blind spots and to look at themselves and take a look in the mirror, which most people are afraid of truly doing because
mm,
of they don't want to see and acknowledge some of the stuff that's happening,
mm,
then someone that goes through life like that, they could be in their 70s or 80s, and that doesn't bring the same
mm,
amount of wisdom
mm,
as someone in their 40s that
mm,
spent 20 years self-discovering, looking in the mirror,
mm,
facing the pains, the shadows, integrating things, peeling layers back. I'd much rather take the wisdom of that 40-year-old than I would of
mm.
the 70 or 80-year-old that stay fixed in the same cycle for decades of their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So,
so, what were
sorry,
you going
you
to
go.
say?
I was just going to say, so 100% right. So how would someone then, like in your experience, personal experience,
Yeah.
and with all the clients you've worked with, what's the starting point for someone like who's been listening to this now and going, oh my God, like, well, my gosh, that's me. And I'm definitely stuck in that space. How do they get out? Like, what's some couple of key things they can do to kind of move or just start the change, you know?
Yeah, start to ask the questions, what are they making things mean to them?
Mm,
Where do they keep coming up against challenges? This like we'll all start to see after a while, which happens with time. You'll start to
mm.
see patterns within yourself. You'll start to see reoccurring incidences happening
Yes.
or
Yeah.
reoccurring dynamics in a relationship that keep causing pain or frustration or friction between you and your partner or
Mm, mm,
it's starting to acknowledge these things. And then, if they keep continually showing up and you keep responding the same way and you keep getting frustrated with it, then you've got to start looking at how you're responding to these things and
mm,
what type of
mm.
questions you're asking.
Yeah.
And whether you're asking questions or just pointing the finger and blaming, which is what a lot of people do. Because if we go back and we strip these layers back for a second, we go from the premise that we co-create our own reality and therefore reality is subjective, then you are creating these situations, these cycles, these continual patterns that you keep
Yep.
coming up against.
Yep.
And
100%.
they're
Yep.
there in
Yep.
order for you to learn from and grow. So the
Ah,
philosophy,
that's
I
good.
would
Yep.
say, which is a
Yep.
key
Yep.
distinction and philosophy of how you look at life and yourself,
Mm,
is
mm,
that you are the creator of your life.
mm,
The universe cares about your expansion and evolution.
mm.
And so, how you then look at these things that you're coming up against is the determining factor of whether you stay rigid and stuck in that cycle and blaming and being the victim versus taking ownership of your creation and then asking the question, how's this serving me? How's this empowering me?
Wow.
What do I need to learn from this? And so, that fundamentally is a difference between going left or right at a T junction as to how
Mm.
you're going to come out of these situations. So, that's
That
one of the first things that I would really recommend doing.
that is, yeah, that's insane. Like you literally just summarized up my experience with that, you know, boss situation. Like I literally had got so, involved and deep into that way of thinking that I had to make a kind of clean cut to. There's a lot of stuff in my personal life going on as well, but I ended up having just to kind of make a clean many cuts to many things.
Mm.
But it was one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Yeah,
Looking
because
back now, because of
it's
what
a
you just said, yeah. But it was
yeah, and it's a
the challenge
trauma. You
got
can
to the
call it a
point
trauma
where,
bond in a sense. There's been some trauma, and you've got this attachment to this person based on the trauma, potentially of losing your dad. And so he plays this surrogate father
yeah,
out, or this
yeah,
need to have that validation. So to, of course, to sever that
mm,
is almost like going through a grieving process of a surrogate fill-in father that you're having to then get
yeah,
like disconnect the energies from.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
that's why it would have felt so heavy and it would have felt all these different things that were wired into your nervous system from when you were
mm,
younger and you
mm,
lost your
mm,
dad.
mm,
All these pieces would have been at play. That's why it would have been quite a difficult thing
yeah,
to try and navigate.
100%. And that's why
Yeah.
you were saying though, that's where the universe gives us these growth challenges. So I was in the middle
Hmm.
of one, a massive one that's kind of changed my life forever. Like me just stepping up and going, making my own decisions now and kind of having a bit of a internal clean out. And, actually funny enough, you mentioned meditation. I started doing a lot of meditation as well. I
Hmm.
even quit my job. I had a bit of contracting stuff going on, but I just was at home on my own for a whole year and just chilled out and sort of healed and did meditation, started some projects, making a bit of money and stuff. But it was quite a transitional time, but that was a real huge challenge, you know. Yeah, interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's
I
good you
suppose
as the
just
meditation you just bring up. Let me just jump in there on that. This is
yeah.
one of the ways that I've really for myself as well and for my clients, guided meditation
Mm,
has really made some profound shifts.
yeah.
Which with the meditation, I find that it works somatically as well. So it's with the nervous system as well as the
Mm,
mind, as cognitively, the
yeah.
perceptions.
Yeah.
And when you come home to yourself and you get back in touch with you, your higher self, through
Mm,
meditation and
mm,
quietening everything without,
mm,
that's one of the most profound
yeah.
exercises, things that I've ever done
Yeah.
for integrating and connecting to myself again.
Yes.
And one of
Yes.
the things that I noticed through doing integrative work like that and that I do with my clients is
Mm,
that I'm not as critical on myself as I used to be. I don't
mm,
berate myself as much as I used to, feeling like I should know everything I need to. I had such high expectations on myself, and because I had a vast knowledge on, the areas of development, and I've been studying it a very long time, working with some of the tops in the world in this
yeah.
field. I would bash the shit out of myself if something happened and I'm like, well, hang on, I should know that. I should have known better. I shouldn't have done that. I should have known, but why am I feeling this way? And I would
Mm,
gaslight the shit out of myself
mm,
for feeling sad or feeling something. I'm like, well, hang on, you should better work this out and balance that out. And I kind of really got into this place. And
mm,
what I worked out too after spending a lot of time going in was that that critical nature I had on myself was just again a learned behavior that I had from growing up, where
mm,
there was a lot of criticism. And so because that was the norm, I then attached to that, and then if it was not in my life externally, I started giving myself the criticism
right.
internally because it's what was familiar, it's what my nervous
Mm,
system
mm,
felt familiar with and seeked out, even though
mm,
it was like horrible for myself.
mm, mm,
Yeah, it had some benefits too in the sense that it would keep me driven and it would keep me wanting to learn. But
mm.
I'll call it inner peace or the ability to love myself no matter what.
Yeah.
That was the piece that fundamentally shifted, that I could be forgiving and understand myself and have peace for those parts,
Yeah.
versus berating myself, minimizing myself when that would come up.
Yeah. So the meditation part was a huge piece. And I think to anyone that's listening, um, for me, I used to think meditation, I mean, I grew up sort of like in a kind of Christian environment and it just talked about meditation, but I never really did a lot of what we're talking about as in meditation, as in stopping, grounding yourself, going within and just, breathing and just, yeah, I do 20 minutes at the moment of meditation. Um,
Yeah.
when I started doing it, yeah, magic happened. I used an app which was from Abraham Hicks. They have like an app you can download. I think it was $7.95 or something like that. And you can just play a track and it's a guided meditation and it just talks you through it. And at the moment, I'm doing transcendental meditation, which is really cool. So I've just started that course, and they really believe it's really interesting that um, as your mind goes into dig deep within and di deep, dives within, it starts a cleaning process, and clean all of these things sort of come and just sort of start to work themselves out, and then they clear out via thoughts. And so your mind just
Yeah.
has thoughts coming up, and that's actually a good sign during meditation that you actually stuff's transformative stuff's happening. And already for me, in the short week that I've been, using this technique, we'll put the link to this and to that app at the bottom of the video for anyone that wants to follow up with them. But I've been finding that just my calmness of being, even in social
Mm.
situations, around the kids has generally increased another level. And just, yeah, just a more feeling of peacefulness, calmness. It's really
Yeah, and probably
interesting.
presence as well, right? Like your
Mm,
mind's not
yeah,
fragmented the same. It's not
yeah,
like kind of
yeah.
off. You can become more peaceful and more present.
Mm,
On the meditation too,
mm,
I had associations with that as well. That
mm,
these because if you look at the extremes,
mm,
these really like
mm,
spiritual hippie type of people do these meditations, and
mm,
it's interesting because if you look at both ends of the spectrum, you can go far either way, right?
mm,
And we will often attach to like one kind of end of the spectrum, go, oh, I don't want to do that.
mm,
And so for a long time, for me, meditation meant kind of, I don't know, like kind of hip, no, it was hippie-ish, but
mm,
um,
mm.
just something I didn't want to stop and do. I didn't have the time for. It was to slow
Yeah,
this thing down.
yeah.
And because I was in my mind and my head a lot, which was one of
Mm,
my kind of superpowers, it's also very deflective. It had me disconnect from myself and my
mm,
feelings the same. And so
mm,
what's happened since I've done more of this is I've integrated my head and my heart, my feeling body. And so I'm more
mm, mm,
connected to myself. And so also just on this too, mindful, which we've touched about before, about what we learn with self-abandonment and different things growing up. We're
yeah.
also dealing with, just to explain to everyone, not just your immediate family as far as all these patterns, behaviors, but
Mm,
generationally,
mm, mm,
because stuff is encoded through epigenetics that we're carrying of our, grandparents, great great grandparents, great 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 grandparents. And so we've got all of this. And so
mm,
all this
mm.
stuff just continues to pass down through the lineage until
Yeah,
someone in that lineage stands up
yeah.
and decides to take on whatever they choose to take on to shift that cycle and shift the perceptions around a particular thing,
Mm,
which
mm,
then
mm.
changes gene expression in the way that we actually
Oh, yeah. It's,
manifest things in our body. So it's really
mm, mm,
powerful when you start to look
mm.
at this and you start to come home to self and start to honor self on a
Yeah,
deeper scale, the impact that has and the ripple effect it has
yeah,
through your family unit and also
yeah.
generations to come.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. Yeah, and I think I just really really want to plug the meditation side of it. I think what I found with transcendental meditation, there's quite a few celebrities. Like there's if you go to their website, Katy Perry's talking about such a busy lifestyle. She's always traveling on the road, to gig after gig sort of thing. And that it's given her the ability to deal with high levels of stress from travel, but also the people, constantly people
Yeah.
around her trying to get in talk with her, take photos of her, just goes to this inner place just to calm, and reset and deep rest as well. Hugh Jackman, the Wolverine,
Yeah. Yeah.
uses it, and back in I think it was 70s or somewhere around there, it was Clint Eastwood and those guys were into it. And apparently Star Wars, don't quote me on this, apparently Star Wars is actually the characters are based on some of the characters are based on transcendental meditation people. And some
Yeah.
of
Right.
the powers or bits and pieces that you see in that relate to the language and the usage of transcendental meditation, the Force, for example. So yeah, it's quite a I would say magic happens. It's like a coming you would say a coming home to self. It
Mm.
allows and it aids a coming home to self, and the impact just sort of ripples through. And I like the word magic. I know it's got a lot of connotations, but I just like the magic that happens, from
Yeah.
doing that. It's really powerful stuff. So
Yeah, well, if you
mm,
look at it,
mm,
we're
mm,
spiritual beings. We're so I don't know how everyone subscribes slightly
mm,
differently, but we're a soul or a spiritual being having a human experience, and
mm,
so we have spirit, but we also have matter, and so matter is our physical form in the physical realm that we live within to
mm,
play things out, and so it's the combination of spirit and matter,
mm,
and spirit without matter is motionless.
Mm,
And so when we connect the two, that's how we understand and love and value ourselves, and then we create in
mm,
this world.
yeah,
So spirit and matter, and the meditation and going within is what helps stay connected to spirit.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. On that note, thanks, Mike, for the wisdom today. And everyone listening, please subscribe. We'll put the links to the Abraham Hicks app in the description, and also Transcendental Meditation website. I think there's a global site. And then for anyone who's thinking about coaching or wanting to uncover this more with personal help, we'll put Mike's website in the link as well. He works with people one-on-one, like he's been working with me. Highly recommend it. And it'll just help. For me, it just helps speed up the results. Like I like fast results and moving forward quite quickly. So for me, having a coach or someone like that I can work with weekly has really helped me speed results up. So that'd be one of the main benefits I would suggest. Yeah.
Yeah, and just on that too, we need, because
Mm,
I have people that help me,
mm,
it's interesting, right? We look at professionals for our cars, we look at them, we have them for our children for teaching or learning an instrument. But not many people invest in actually helping to grow themselves and understanding themselves, which is you are the only constant in this
mm,
life. That's you. And so it amazes me how many people don't invest in understanding and loving themselves and valuing themselves because it changes your reality when you do.
mm,
And so that integrative work that I do really is taking those parts and pieces that have been blind spots or shadows they haven't wanted to acknowledge or see because of shame or guilt, and then we bring them to the surface and integrate them so that they can love those parts as well and therefore love themselves wholly. That's
mm,
that's really the
mm.
key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, my
Cool.
friend.
Thank you, Mike.
Nice chat today. It's a good chat.
Yeah, it was good. Appreciate it. Appreciate you.